Hello everyone and welcome back. Today in this video I am continuing to read Kids in the Bible. If you guys are interested in this book, I will have the link below for you. I've already done 1 through 10, so we're going to go to chapter 11 because that's where we're at. Chapter 11 right now. So we're going to start on chapter 11, which is The Warrior Kid. Sometimes we want to speed up time and skip to more fun stuff. Maybe you want a vacation to start soon. Maybe you want to hurry up and be a grown-up. Maybe you want the school day to whoosh past so you can get home and play. David probably felt like that. Samuel had anointed him king, but it wasn't God's time for David to rule yet. All he could do was wait and seek to love God with all his heart, mind, and strength, even on the boring days. But one day was pretty exciting. David's older brothers had joined other Israelites and King Saul to fight their enemy, the Philistines. Well, they were supposed to be fighting, but the battle had frozen. A giant Philistine warrior named Goliath had threatened God's people, demanding someone come fight him. Everyone was terrified because this guy looked taller and mightier than any guy they'd ever seen. He seemed really grumpy too, like someone had woken him up by plucking out his beard. The Israelites' courage melted like warm butter. Speaking of butter, David went to the battlefield to deliver food to his brothers. When David heard the warrior's threats, he was mad. David thought, "Who is this guy who thinks he can threaten God's people? Doesn't he know God is with us?" On all those boring days, God had been growing courage in David. David was a shepherd, so his job was to keep his sheep safe and full of life. When bears and lions tried to attack David's flock, David bravely fought and killed them. Now that David saw God's people under attack, his shepherding instincts kicked in. David would do whatever it took to keep God's sheep safe and thriving. So what if Goliath was a giant? David had God on his side. David was just a kid, but he was part of God's special plan to bless the whole world. David's bravery annoyed his brothers, and it made no sense to King Saul, but King Saul agreed to let David face Goliath. He even let David try on the kingly armor. The armor didn't fit, so David went as himself, knowing God was the best armor in the world. He also grabbed a few stones from a nearby stream and put them in his shepherd's pouch. When Goliath saw young David, he immediately hated him. He must have thought, "How rude for the Israelites to send this puny kid when they know I'm a mighty warrior." But David stood in courage. He shouted to Goliath, "You come against me with weapons, but I come against you in the name of the Lord." Goliath had no idea what a mighty weapon that is. David continued, "When I defeat you, it'll prove to everyone that God saves, and every battle belongs to him." Goliath ran to attack, but David grabbed one of the stones from his bag, put it in his slingshot, and slung it toward Goliath. Thwop! The stone sunk into Goliath's forehead. Thunk! The fierce warrior fell to the ground. Whenever anyone heard the story of the young boy who defeated the fearsome giant with just a stone, it made no sense. They could only think one thing: God did this. David was a courageous shepherd boy that exciting day because he was a shepherded by God. David once wrote a song about that. It starts like this: "The Lord is my shepherd." David knew God was with him always, helping him grow and thrive on boring days and exciting days, guiding him through scary times, caring for him when enemies hated him, and promising to bring him home one day. But God was David's shepherd. David could face bears, lions, and even giants. Terrifying warriors. God's children have sung David's shepherd song for centuries. In fact, 1,000 years later, a man named Jesus talked about David's shepherd song. He said, "I am the good shepherd." Can you believe it? David's song was about him, Jesus. Jesus is God, and he came to the battlefield of earth to defeat an enemy much scarier than Goliath, our sin. He would do whatever it took to protect us, God's sheep. Dear God, you are my shepherd. I know you are with me always. Help me remember. Amen. Chapter 12. The king who was hungry for wisdom. When he was old, King David gave his throne to his young son, Solomon. This was strange because Solomon had older brothers who probably seemed more kingly, But David knew the Lord loves to do his big work through smallish people. Solomon wasn't technically a kid, but he felt like a kid. Sometimes grown-ups feel like little kids on the inside. It must have been scary for Solomon to think about leading a whole kingdom. Besides running God's kingdom, Solomon was given a super important job: to build a special temple that would be considered the Lord's house forever. Before King David died, he told the whole kingdom about the plan, saying, "God had chosen my son Solomon to lead, though he is young and inexperienced." Solomon might have thought, "Wow, thanks, Dad, for reminding everyone that I'm totally not prepared for this job." How was this brand new, barely a grown-up king going to do the big job of leading God's people and building God's house? He probably felt like a kindergartner who'd been accidentally elected president. One night, God talked to young Solomon in a dream and asked him, "What do you want me to give you?" Solomon could have asked for money, a long life, fame, unlimited cheeseburgers, anything. But he didn't. He said, "Lord, you have made me king, but I am so young. I don't know what I'm doing. Will you give me wisdom? Your wisdom will help me see the difference between good and bad so that I can lead your people well." God was so happy to hear this. Parents love it when their children are hungry for wisdom. Wisdom means living our lives in a way that lines up with God's ideas. To be wise, a person needs to know God's ideas and understand how to act on them. With joy, God said to Solomon, "Because you asked for wisdom, I will give you more wisdom than anyone else has ever had in the world. You'll be drenched in it. And even better, I will also give you the things you didn't ask for, like money and fame." No word on the cheeseburgers. God added, "If you keep following me like a child follows a parent, I will make sure you live a long time." Solomon was just a kid, but he was part of God's special plan to bless the whole world. Under Solomon's wise leadership, God's people enjoyed life more than ever, and God's house was like a bit of heaven on earth. People far away heard about Solomon's wisdom and said, "Wow, Solomon's God is amazing." Sadly, as Solomon grew older and more experienced, his heart began to turn away from the Lord. He surrounded himself with women who followed fake gods. Solomon forgot about the true God and followed the fake gods instead. Even though God gave him the ability to see the difference between good and bad, had Solomon decided that God wasn't good? Even though God's ideas make everything better, had Solomon decided that God's ideas were keeping him from good things? Even though Solomon once had childlike faith, had he chosen grown-up greed instead? It seemed like it. Because of Solomon's rebellion, God removed his protection. When Solomon died and his son took the throne, God allowed the kingdom to be chopped in half. Things would never be the same again. Would there ever be a king who would follow the Lord no matter what? Yes, King Jesus would follow God no matter what. Dear God, as I grow, help me to always follow you like a child, like a little child. Help me to be hungry for your wisdom. Amen. Chapter 13. Kids who grow in wisdom. Throughout the Bible, you'll find words from parents to their kids. These words are important for all of God's kids because they help us grow in wisdom. Remember Solomon, in his great wisdom, he wrote down lots of words for his kids that are included in the book of Proverbs. He began the book saying, "My son, be careful to listen to what your father teaches you. Don't ignore what your mother teaches. Our words are like a beautiful necklace or a shiny gold medal around your neck. They will be a blessing to you." The book of Proverbs ends with more words from a parent to a child. This time it's a queen speaking to her son, a prince named Lemuel. He would grow up to be king and to be a wise, grown-up king. He needed training as a child. Lemuel's mother knew all sorts of things and loved Lemuel very much. She wanted him to be wise, so she taught him wisdom like this. There are many things that can pull at your heart and get in the way of doing the right thing. Be careful. Don't forget to be kind and just. Don't ignore people who need your help. Speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Lemuel's mom also taught her son something that was important for all kids to know, especially as they grow. It was about celebrating what God celebrates. For example, the world often celebrates women who look beautiful, but Lemuel's mom wanted to train Lemuel to value what God values. A woman who is wise because she knows and loves God. To train Lemuel, his mother taught him a poem that went with all the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. That way, Lemuel could know these truths as well as he knew his ABCs. The poem came to a close with some memorial words that are helpful for kids everywhere. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord will be praised. What a wonderful man Lemuel would grow up to be if he paid attention to the right things. What a wonderful man Lemuel would grow up to be if he cheered and clapped when he saw someone shape their everyday actions around their worship of God. You see, in God's family, you don't have to be shiny on the outside to be celebrated. Even the little ways you grow in wisdom are exciting to God. The world may not give you a trophy for working hard at a chore or giving food to someone who is poor, but it all matters to God. So that's the kind of stuff that matters to God's kids. When God's kids see one another growing on the inside, they can give one another high fives and wahoos and I see yous because they know their father sees and celebrates this stuff. When kids have wise parents and listen carefully to their parents' teachings, they find so many opportunities to clap for one another. A parent's wise words are like shiny gold medals around a kid's neck. These wise words from parents are a gift to all of God's children. In fact, the whole Bible is made up of wise words from God the Father to his children. Kids who grow in wisdom are part of God's special plan to bless the whole world. Dear God, help me grow in your wisdom. Help me to see and celebrate wisdom in others. Amen. Chapter 14, The Twice Saved Boy. Some powerful people might ignore kids, but God doesn't. He sees and loves every kid, and lots of stories in the Bible prove it. In one story, God saved the same boy twice through his prophet Elijah. A prophet was someone who spoke God's truth, and God's people were supposed to listen carefully to the prophet's words and believe them. That means prophets had to listen carefully to God. God told a prophet named Elijah to go to a place called Zarephath. The city was suffering from a drought, which means it hadn't rained in a long time, so food wasn't growing, and people everywhere were hungry, including Elijah. Elijah needed to eat. God told him that he'd command a widow, a woman whose husband had died in Zarephath, to feed Elijah. You would think God would send Elijah to a rich widow who had a giant pantry with an epic snack stash, but he didn't. He sent Elijah to a woman who was struggling to feed herself and her son. When Elijah arrived in Zarephath and asked her for food, she said, I only have enough flour and oil for one last meal for me and my son. I'm going to make this meal, and then we will die. What a scary day for this boy and his mom. But God had a plan. He sent Elijah to this woman and this boy on purpose. Through the widow, God would save Elijah, and through Elijah, God would save the widow once and the child twice. Only God can pack so much saving in one story. Elijah listened to God and said to the woman, Don't be afraid. Make a meal for me and then make something for you and your son. God had promised that your jar of flour and jug of oil will not be empty until it rains again. The young boy watched weakly as his mother did what Elijah said. As his tummy growled, he probably thought, Wow, my mom must really believe this prophet's words. After all, she was giving away their last meal. He must have been amazed by what happened next. Day after day, the food ingredients did not run out. The boy ate every day and grew stronger. this prophet really has spoken God's truth. And the boy and his mother had incredible proof that God had seen them, provided for them, and loved them. This boy was saved by God, and it wouldn't be the last time. Sadly, the boy later became ill and died. His mother was devastated. She carried his body to Elijah and cried, "Man of God, what do you have against me?" With great concern, Elijah took the boy and cried out to God 3 times, begging God to bring the boy back to life. It was an impossible ask, but nothing is impossible with God, right? God listened to Elijah, and guess what? The boy lived again. When the widow held the twice-saved boy in her arms, she knew Elijah truly was God's prophet. Only the true God would have the eyes to see, the heart to love, and the power to save a boy, not once, but twice. The twice-saved boy was just a kid, but he was a reminder of God's special plan to bless the whole world. Every kid can experience God's saving power, although it doesn't always look like we think. Sometimes God doesn't save us from terrible things, but He's offered us saving from the most terrible things, sin and death. God's Son, Jesus, took the punishment we deserve for our sin by dying on the cross. And like the twice-saved boy, Jesus did not stay dead, but He came back to life through God's power. It's true. Any kid or grown-up who looks to Jesus can be saved from sin because Jesus took the punishment. And they can be saved from death because Jesus promised that even when their body dies, they can live forever with Him. Dear God, thank you for seeing me, loving me, and giving your Son, Jesus, so that I can be saved from the most terrible things, sin and death. Amen. Chapter 15. The Good News Girl. God wanted kids born into the nation of Israel to learn about Him, so that no matter where they were or what they did, they would know God is a true and only God, and they could bless all world with their love for Him. Their parents taught them these important words. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 to 5. If the kids remembered these words, they would grow up knowing that God is most important. They could love Him with all they have, and they could point others to God, since following God is the way to everything wonderful. Kids have always been part of God's special plan to bless the whole world. When part of Israel was invaded by Syria, Syria, one of Israel's enemies, a little girl, was captured. The Syrians carried her off so she could work as a servant far away. This had to be very scary for the little girl, yet she knew God was with her. She'd been carried far from home, but she carried the truth of home in her heart. The little girl began to work as a servant for the wife of a man named Naaman. He was the commander of the Syrian army and a mighty man, people deeply respected. but he suffered from a skin disease called leprosy. A person with leprosy was alive, but it was like their skin forgot. Their outsides seemed to rot away and made it hard for the suffering person to be near anyone. The young servant girl, even though she was so young and so far from home, had compassion on Naaman. The girl remembered a man from her homeland named, I'm guessing it's supposed to be Elijah, but it's spelled Elisha, who was God's prophet. She told Naaman's wife, if we were in Israel, I know God could heal Naaman through his prophet. For some reason, Naaman and his wife believed this young girl and what she said about God. So the king of Syria sent a letter to the king of Israel and said, Naaman is coming so that you can cure him. When the king of Israel read this letter, he was upset. He knew only God could cure something like leprosy. And if Naaman didn't find a cure, Syria might become angry with Israel and make war. But God's prophet, Elisha, I think it's supposed to be Elijah, said, why are you upset? Tell Naaman to come to me, and then he will know the true God has a prophet in Israel. When Naaman came, Elijah gave some strange instructions. He said, go wash in the Jordan River 7 times, and you will be healed. This irritated Naaman. With grown-up pride, he thought, the Jordan River is no big deal. The rivers in my home country are much better. This is silly. But Naaman's servants were wise and said, you should obey God through the prophet. So Naaman went to the Jordan River, and guess what? After he dipped in the water the 7th time, his skin looked brand new, as clear and clean as a baby's. The young servant girl was right. God is the one true God, and following him is the way to everything wonderful. Naaman had to follow God's words with childlike faith, and suddenly everything terrible on his outsides was made right. The things the young girl learned about God in her homeland were a blessing for her and for Naaman. This good news girl was just a kid, but she was a glimmer of God's special plan to bless the whole world. One day a child would come with the best news for sinners. Following God with childlike faith washes us clean from sin. Through him, everything terrible on our insides can be made right. Dear God, you are the one true God. Thank you for sending your son Jesus to make us clean from sin. Amen. All right, so there you guys have it. That is chapters 10 to 15 in Kids in the Bible. Like I said, if you guys are interested in this book, I will have the link below for you. If you want to go back to the other chapters, the first 10 chapters, I've got videos 1 through 5 and then 5 through 10. This one's 10 or 11 through 15. If you want to continue with me on this, just subscribe to my channel because I'm reading the whole book. So make sure to subscribe. Go ahead and like this video as well. And I hope to see you guys all in the next video. God bless.